Aloha, and welcome to another Candid Conversation. This is going to be a little different take on our podcasts and our Zoom calls. I'm with Alex Kraft, and Alex has written a blog post for us that'll be going up tonight, actually, on just before Thanksgiving, on getting better. And prior to our starting the recording, we've been talking about, well, how do we know? And Alex and I both came from a little bit of an athletic background, and then we moved from athletics to the professional world, and that's where we ran into this problem. So maybe, Alex, you can give the group the same introduction as you and I were talking about.
Hey, Ron. Happy Thanksgiving. Yes, I've always been fascinated with the idea of improvement. Being an athlete, you practice all the time, or you should be practicing all the time, and you get to see the benefits of that practice. And it was the hardest thing for me when I transitioned to, a real job of knowing, the time that I spent. We all talk about it. We spend more time at work than we do with our family, sadly. And I'm spending all this time at work. Am I getting any better? 2 years in, 4 years in. I mean, yeah, I guess I'm faster and I know more formulas in Excel than I did 2 years ago. But uh, am I better at my job today than when I started or a year ago? And I didn't know. And it was very difficult. Like we talked about previously, like I play basketball. So yeah, I knew after spending time that I could dribble better with my left hand. I could, I'd work on free throws. My free throw percentage went up. There's a scoreboard. So as a team, you're getting better because there's a result. And then in the workplace, I found myself lost for quite a bit of time, just not knowing. If all this, I cared about my job, all this time that I'm putting in, uh, is it paying off, and am I improving?
And if you think about it, the companies don't seem to show any interest in helping us get better either. We're hired to do a job. We're trained to do the job, the specific job, and then we're told to go do the job. If you're on commission, you get a scorecard, you get a check. But if you aren't, most companies don't provide performance reviews for their employees.
We didn't.
It's a serious problem, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges there. We didn't really do performance reviews. I don't remember having one, and I was there for 17 years. I remember giving some, but it wasn't until the last couple of years where we just told people, like, look, we hear you. We're going to start giving performance reviews. Now, I think unfortunately, many people view them as as a way to get a pay increase, and then so that's the main goal. But then other people shy away from confrontation, so they don't want to hear constructive criticism, and so there's a lot of problems there.
On top of that, I don't know that did anybody train you how to do or conduct a performance review?
No,
And
definitely not.
There is a plan to it. It's disheartening, to say the least, and it's going to change. The next 5 to 10 years, I think, is going to force it to be changing. The millennials, the younger workers, they want improvement. They don't want to sit on their hands. Their life has been much more dynamic than mine was, as an example. My granddaughter, she's all over the damn place. There's nothing that she won't look up on Google and get an answer, no matter what the problem is. Mm-hmm. And so we've got this performance review, and actually the first question really in a performance review would be, what if you weren't doing what you're doing, what would you like to be doing? Now we're asking the boss, the leader, to be able to understand that individual across the table, not as a worker, but as a person. Mm-hmm. And nobody's trained them for that.
I agree. And also, part of the review matters on who's giving it, right? That's what you're saying, is that if that person has spent zero time getting to know the employee in the year, how are you supposed to give a review? How is that supposed to be worth it?
Yeah. And the other side of it, the last month or two, I've been reading much more prominent comments that with interest rates going up, with inflation going up, with the anxiety in the marketplace, performance reviews have come back as a vehicle to get rid of people. Not as a
Right. So
vehicle to improve people, but to reduce the headcount. And you're starting to see headcount reductions all over their own place.
yeah.
It's so do you do anything personally that you think would be good for other people to copy that you use to try and get better on a constant or continuing basis?
Sure. I've never read more in my life than what I do today in the last couple of years. I think reading is a huge component. Um, yeah, what I wrote about is it's kind of like my journey to like understanding how someone can get better. I thought it's just practice, and I think a lot of people, and when I say a lot of people, I was one of these people too, for a long period of time. Uh, think that you just kind of get it through osmosis. Like you spend so much time that you're just gonna wake up on a Monday 10 years from now and just like you get out of bed on a Monday, like, I'm just exactly, yeah, I'm just magically better. I've just absorbed all of this information. And really, to me, like I came to understand that it has to be an active pursuit. And you have to seek it out. I do think a lot of people want to get better, but they just don't know how. Uh,
I
and
agree with that.
so,
I agree with that 100%.
and
I
so
don't
my,
I don't think, one of the things I used to, sorry to interrupt you, Alex, but one of the things I used to say is, the first day when I was in the front of a class teaching, somewhere in the first half hour, I'd look around the group of people and say, okay, how many of you guys and gals rub your hands in glee coming in here this morning saying, boy, I'm really going to screw up today? And the answer, of course, is nobody. So fundamental truths about people, we all want to do a good job, no matter what the job is, we want to do it well. We all know we can get better, but nobody's helping us get better, so we kind of park it. Our wives do, our children do, sometimes the church does, or our peer groups or whatever, peripherally making comments. Oh, why are you doing that, Ron? You get that all the time, right?
yeah.
And as you know, I read like a maniac. But there's really no purposeful plan once you leave school that you should get into to get better. I think that's a huge hole.
It is definitely. I'll skip ahead because you just kind of touched on it. Though I forget how you phrased it, but I think one of the big problems is just our environment of how we want to rag on people for losing. Because I think losing teaches us valuable things, and there's such a like a negative perception. I think you mentioned how people come into class, right? Like that should be an environment where you just throw stuff out, you try stuff, because that's one of the important ways that you can improve in is by just making mistakes. And so, some people will say, there is no such thing as a mistake, it's just learning, right? And I think there's truth to that. But there's such a negative, like we always like to put down that person for trying something that didn't work out. He's a loser. You get classified as one. And then what does it do? It makes us as people clam up, go into a shell, and not risk the embarrassment. And I was like that too. Like once again, as an athlete, I went through a long period of time where I only wanted to do things that I was the best at. That's the worst thing, right? It's like, oh, if I'm not the best at this, this is stupid.
Yeah.
And you can't grow with that attitude.
No, the only way you learn is with making mistakes, and yet our culture hurts people that make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the obvious example is doing something illegal, but there's also shortcuts at work. There's also shortcuts in the family. Skipping homework when you're a student. I wasn't a very good student, so I'm a perfect example of what not to do. But it's really, I'm getting more and more in the place that I want to start hiring kids at middle school, which is maybe 15. I don't know the ages anymore, but 14, 15, and bring them in one night a week, maybe one Saturday morning a week, and have them work with us in different places. See if we like them, see if they like us, and if they do, everything's cool, and we go forward. If they don't, we move on to another. I'd similarly like to see us start with interns, where at one of the dealers, two of the dealers that I worked with, the youngest manager, which was me in most cases, had people that we hired between their junior and senior years at university, or between their 2 years of a master's degree. And they'd come in for 4 months and work with us. And the first 30 days, I put them on the warehouse floor, receiving and shipping, and I'd lose a good third to a half of them because that's too much work and it's dirty, and that's not what I want to do. So we got rid of that stuff right away. But finning is an example. We used to have 12 a year. And when I got there in 1978, the parts managers, the service managers, the branch managers, all had come into the company that way. So imagine the culture that creates in the company.
Mm-hmm.
It's really powerful. But then performance reviews, it's got to be part of the puzzle. But as an example, if somebody quits, the exit interview. I quit a job and they had a sensitivity session, which means there were 12 people in the room trying to get me to stay.
Huh.
And it was really uncomfortable. I wonder what would happen if a mechanic who's going to leave us, if we had an intervention where 3 or 4 guys sat down with them and talked about, well, why are you leaving? And really, in 99% of the cases, it's the boss. It's the command and control circumstance, isn't it?
It is.
Salesmen, what's the primary reason that salesmen leave? Is it because they can't sell and they don't make enough money? That might be part of it, in which case it's self-correcting, isn't it? But if they're good, how come we don't try and keep them? What kind of training do we give salesmen?
Very little.
What kind of training do we give managers? Very little.
Even less, probably.
Yeah. So, you really touched a nerve with me, actually, when, getting better was the headline, I think, of your blog. It really is an appropriate question to be asking. How the hell do we get better?
Mm-hmm.
We have assessments. I recommend that every person that touches a customer or leads people has an assessment of their performance once a year. And there's a score. And then you sit down with that and talk to your boss. The two of you know that you've got things that you can get better at.
Mm-hmm.
And allow that discussion to take place. I'm not going to criticize you. I'm not going to crucify you. I used to, Bob Hewitt was the dealer principal in Quebec when I got into the industry, and he was looking for me. I was looking after inventory, but I was out in the warehouse. I was in a sweatshirt and jeans, and I'm schlepping parts all over, and I'm dirty as hell. And here's this elegant man who's 6'2", 6'4", in a 3-piece suit. He comes up to me, puts his arm around my shoulder, and says, "I'm really disappointed in you, Ron." And I looked up at him. I said, "Me too. What's your disappointment?" And you could literally see his face starting to fall apart. But how often do people have that kind of a comment? Did anybody do that to you?
No.
Did your father ever do that to you?
No, he did not.
Mine did that all the time. It was one of those cases. It was never ever good enough. And I'm not being critical. It's just being.
Oh, you know what? I shouldn't say that. My dad used to give me a lot of constructive criticism, but there was never a compliment. It was always a but. So I do remember that.
Yeah, isn't that interesting too, eh? Because again, from a parenting point, you have children, I've had children and grandchildren. As a parent, you don't know how the hell to do those things.
No, you
My
just pretty much copy what your parent did. That's because I remember talking to my mom a lot about like, why can't he just tell me that I did good? Why can't it just be left at that? And she would always just tell me, well, but his father did it this way, so I'm sure that's just what he's doing.
and we excuse it
Yeah,
rather than, and wouldn't that be interesting from a leadership perspective? Mothers and fathers are totally different people, obviously. And they're all of various scales, terrific or not so terrific. All could get better, I'm sure, including me and my wife. But we really don't have this embedded in our thinking that we should be striving to get better. Other than using the athletics example is perfect, but you leave athletics out of it, music's the same thing. Maybe performance arts, dancing and painting, some of those things. But working in an office, a CPA, a purchasing agent,
yeah.
what is there, you know? We Steve Johnson wrote a piece last night about our centers of excellence and how our classes are being approved now in curricula for technical schools and are going to be replacing general education credits, and the structure of our classes, and all of it again aiming at helping people identify their potential, which is also an alien concept. How do you know what your potential is? Damn, I don't know.
Right.
You run into a wall, or you're not tall enough. That's easy. I'm not 7 feet, so I can't play basketball. I'm not fast running, so I can't be a track star. But when it's an office job, I show up, I'm clean, I can do arithmetic, my people can read my writing, I qualify. Right?
Mhm.
Friend of mine was a recruiter, a management recruiter for a company, and you want to talk about a sweatshop, those guys are really something. They call around employers that they've placed, and do you know anybody that can do such and such a job as the entry?
Right.
And away we go. And then they place them, and once they place them, that's it. It's the last that recruiter is there until he needs another guy. So how do we get that person not to say yes to a recruiter when they call up? It's a whole critique of a company, Alex. It's a whole critique of the organism of a business.
It is, and I think we let people get away with, well, we're just so busy. We don't have time. But meanwhile, the development of their employees should be one of the biggest uh, most important parts of running your business is development. We just don't develop people, and that's not just an equipment industry issue. I
Oh
think
no,
that's
it's societal.
it is.
You
I
know,
think it's just
look at Walt Disney. Here comes back Bob Iger.
yeah,
1 month after his replacement signed a contract extension.
right.
It's really interesting. So the people that you work with on a daily basis with Heave,
Mhm.
you know them like your brothers.
I do.
You sit beside them, you talk all day long, and socially, if you don't have that, you'd miss it.
Mhm.
What do you do to make them better, or what are they doing to make you better?
They have different viewpoints than I do, and that's something that I did not write about. But just in this comes up in this conversation. It's because I think that's important too. So I think societally there is this groupthink that is just becoming more and more dominant, and I know, and I think this does apply to the equipment industry more so than others. Just I've been here for 30 years and everything's the same. But what was really cool for me with Heave is that we have a few guys here, and they all have different backgrounds. Now, some of them they're obviously are tech backgrounds, which is foreign to me, but they gave me a different viewpoint of everything, and that was incredibly positive. And it's funny, like in the early days when we were building out the first versions, like I would explain to them how dealerships worked, and and they would sit there and be like, "What? Really? That's stupid." And then, they would come up with some ideas, and I'm like, I was at a dealership for 18 years, and no one ever had that idea. That's a really good idea. And some of the ideas that they threw out there, I dismissed pretty quickly, but that is one way to get just having different viewpoints and just throwing stuff out there that you could workshop and you tweak a little bit. That's one of the ways you can get better. That's another way of implementing change. I
Yeah.
remember calling one of my friends in the industry and giving him one of the ideas that one of our product guys came up with for parts. And he's like, "Man, that's a great idea." And I was like, "Well, I can't take credit for it, but this 30-year-old product designer who has zero experience in heavy equipment just came up. It was a great idea."
Yeah, I call that perspective, and some people call it framing, some people call it biases. It's the model in which we were framed, developed. The guy that coined the phrase "thinking outside the box" lives in Malta. His name's DeSoto. He's written many books, but isn't that the truth? That 30-year guy that you're talking about, he's in a box.
Yeah.
That 30-year-old product designer didn't have that box.
No.
So he's free.
And he is. And it just, like I said, it's not every idea that he comes up with is, "Oh, let's do that. It's genius." But when you have an environment where that's what you do and just, hey, throw this out there. I mean, I was explaining to you kind of some of the new things we've been working on, and we went to a couple of customers and said, "Hey, this is a crazy idea." And each one of them was like, "I love that idea." you know?
Well, everybody, Alex, I think everybody's looking for a silver bullet, a magic shroom or whatever, a solution. My buddy at Smart Equip, Alex Schussler, coined the phrase with me of going from paper to glass.
Mhm.
When we brought technology and computers in, all we did was we took a paper form that was 6-point copies, and we put that format up on a screen, and instead of writing, you filled it in with a keyboard. But we didn't make anything better.
Mhm.
We just made it faster. And like you mentioned, we don't have enough time for that. Or let me frame it a little different way. An employee is an asset,
Mhm.
not an expense. And almost every business is looking at their workforce as an expense. We hear this term productivity. GDP is going up, our productivity is going up, everything's cool. Well, how has the productivity actually changed? It's more work being done by fewer people. Now, is it because we're working smarter, or we're having those people working harder?
Mhm.
I think it's the latter. It's kind of weird. Six Sigma, 5S, industrial engineering, all of these things that have been out there trying to help us change. Your guy comes up with an idea because he's got a different frame. He's got a different view. And some of them will work, some of them won't. God, if he came up with all the right ideas all the time, he'd be a miracle. He wouldn't be working with you. He's doing something else, making a fortune.
Well, hopefully he can make a fortune here.
There you go. Yeah, sorry, I lost my head there for a minute. Sorry about that. But that's the other thing that really comes into it. How do we measure our performance? Money.
Do you know the economist named Tyler Cowen?
Yes.
I've just come across him recently, so I've been trying to read like his stuff, like he has like a daily blog and he does a lot of podcasts, which I listen to those too when he's talking about topics. But he talks about everything. But one of the things I came across him writing or saying the other day that I found impactful was he says one of the problems that he has with schooling today is that there's too much homework. And we just train these kids to just do homework. It's that like school should be experimentation, like what you've talked about. And I didn't really read about entrepreneurship before this 2-year journey with Heave. But that's a common theme across all of these entrepreneurs. Like, I don't know if there is a single entrepreneur who hit a home run on a company where it was the first company that they ever started.
Very rare if it happens at all.
Right. It's always, I tried these 4 things, they didn't work out. Then I found this. And I was listening to, I'm going to get his name wrong, but I think his first name is Shamath. I think he's Sri Lankan. He's one of the early product guys at Facebook. And I was listening to him the other day, and he would talk about early meetings at Facebook where it was a weekly meeting where he'd have all the engineers there, and they would go through. He's like, "Tell me what experiments you ran this week," and it wasn't about what was right and got results. Like, he would just like, "Oh, you only ran 5 experiments. You're not doing your job." "Oh, you did 100 experiments and 99 didn't work. Great. You're trying things." And that, yeah, that's something that just from researching and reading in the whole field of entrepreneurship has really resonated with me. It makes
Well,
sense.
also you're introducing a new element for today, podcasts.
Mhm.
They're incredible things. I don't know how much you pay attention to TED Talks, but that's
Very
another.
little.
Oh, that's a platform that you should really pay attention to. I probably once a week I find something in those and podcasts. Behavioral scientists, Neri Al, you've heard me talk about him in his book Indistractable. How he gave me ideas that changed how I do work. After 75 years, what the heck's that all about? How you would think that I would have figured it out by now, but no,
I,
far from it.
yeah, my exposure to TikTok is my kids just staring at their iPad on TikTok constantly. So I have a negative perception.
Well, I've got a negative perception on TikTok as well, but that's not what I'm talking about. The TED Talk. One guy, just as an example, his name is Rory Sutherland. He does a talk on perception, and he uses a couple of illustrations. One of which is the underground in England, in London.
Mhm.
Satisfaction with the tube there went up when they put LCD screens up in each of the stations that was a countdown clock as to when the next train was going to arrive. In certain countries in Asia, the traffic lights, the red, yellow, green traffic lights, have a countdown clock on the red or on the green or on the orange, so that you have a little bit of warning to get there. Now, the Chinese apparently did it on the red light. And it countdown. Everybody was like, it's an Indy 500 takeoff. Here we go. So there's obvious things that come out. But he talked about Sutherland. It's kind of a weird illustration today. That I haven't liked a drinks party since they banned smoking. So did you go to a drinks party? I guess that's a cocktail party in England. You go to a drinks party and you're talking with people and you get tired of talking and you just want to go to the window and look outside and then collect your thought. So you go there and you've got a cigarette in your hand. People look at you all by yourself staring out the window. They think you're some sort of philosopher. You're staring out the window and you don't have a smoke in your hand. You're an antisocial idiot. Again, perceptions, right?
Right.
So the market guy, entrepreneurs, they'll hit one that works, Alex, after 3 or 4 that failed. But I bet you if they had applied the same tools that they did on the fourth and the first would have succeeded as well.
Very possible. Yeah.
There's some remarkable things in learning, self-directed learning. The trouble with it is we get lazy. It's like physical fitness. I don't exercise anywhere near what I used to do. I don't burn anywhere near the calories. That's also why I end up with a little bit more of a pear shape instead of upside down pyramid. But I want to help people find their potential. Homework. The Department of Education in the US says for every hour of face-to-face time, you're supposed to have 2 hours of homework.
Jeez.
That's a rule. Okay, so I'm working with technical schools and they have different qualifiers on face-to-face time for academic credits.
Mhm.
So one of the guys, the company schools that we were working with required 37 and a half hours for one academic credit, 12 and a half hours face-to-face in a classroom, 25 hours homework. And you've been around me enough to know that I'm a bit of an idiot. I said, well, what do you do to verify they do the homework? Nothing. And that doesn't resonate with me. So our classes consist of 6.5 hours of face-to-face, internet-based face-to-face. And I've created 13 hours of homework.
Mm-hmm.
And with the 13 hours, we qualify it as close reading and annotation. And we have a 5-question quiz at the end of every reading assignment that they have to get 3 correct on. It's called a check for understanding. So our homework is actually verified.
Mm-hmm.
And the schools look at me and say, no, wait a second, that's not good for us. Interesting, huh? So if you think about it in round numbers, if I have 30 hours to get a credit, 20 hours of that is going to be homework and nobody knows that you did it or didn't. And you're right. I think that's the way schooling's going. It, you know, I'll do a dump here, a mind dump. I'll reference you to a book and say, okay, tomorrow be prepared to come in and talk to me about Southeast Asia.
You become experts in memorization. You don't
You learn to the test. You learn to score on the test. It's not, and it's the same thing with how we indoctrinate people in a job, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
We hire you, we onboard you, we walk you around, we introduce you to people, we show you where the toilets are, where lunch is, blah, blah, and maybe we go to lunch the first day together. And then I start showing you how to do the job the way I did it. And then you do the job with me watching you, kind of like you're learning to fly a plane.
Mm-hmm.
And then I tell you, now practice this, keep doing this, fewer mistakes, make it faster and faster and faster, and you know, this will be okay. And that's it. We walk away. That's pretty common, isn't it?
It is. And the best coaches I've ever had all used to tell me the why behind something. You know, the reason why we do it this way is because of this. You know, the understanding the why helps the learning immensely.
One of our classes is called What's Your Why? Why do you do what you do? And it's a play on another psychiatrist. What do you do? Well, somebody at a, you know, this is outdated anymore, but you know, a church social or a meeting of scouts or whatever. What's your job? What do you do? And everybody can tell you what they do. Oh, that's interesting. How do you do that? And a lot of people can tell you that too. But then the real question is, why do you do that? Well, they got make a salary. I got to have a learning. That's not why you work. Why were you a basketball player? Because you like to compete.
Mm-hmm.
And you worked hard to be good enough to get on the floor.
Yeah, and I love the game.
It's true. And I wonder how many people say that about work.
Not many.
Monday morning used to be my favorite morning. Can you believe that? You know why?
You're in the 0.5% of that.
Yeah, but you know why that was true? I needed a break. The weekend was too busy.
I hear you on that. I mean,
Yeah.
taking the kids all over town, playing different sports and stuff. You're right. I can just not have to deal with any of that on Monday. That's good perspective.
Yeah. What would I do to make myself better? What do I need to do to become better at the job? Those are questions that every leader and every employee should be asking of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
How can I get better? I had a coach in swimming who would walk down the length of the pool side by side with me. And I did backstroke, and he'd be moving my hand where it hit the water, 2 inches this way, 1 inch that way, whatever, just to change the way that paddle worked. It's the why. Reading about John Wooden, one of the best basketball coaches that's around out there in history. He said he had more work preparing for practice than he did in practice. It's some people have it naturally, but most people don't. We need to give it to them.
You know what I think is kind of is cool, is that things all carry over. And so, we're talking about how do I improve in my job, but I bet you that if you just improve in a certain area, you take on a new task in your personal life, it'll carry over to work. So, like for example, like you gave a fitness example earlier. Like I bet if somebody was like, all right, I'm going to run a marathon, even though I've never run a marathon, and you run a marathon, you do the work necessary to complete a marathon. I bet you in your professional life you'll be more confident, which will carry over to a better performance. Take up any, and that was one of the things I wrote about. It's just like trying a new activity. You'll be, in certain, certain like a martial art or something. You become more disciplined, more calm. It translates to work. You're more calm under pressure, which is a huge asset to have. So I think that's what's really neat too, is that it doesn't have to all be geared towards professional development. Yeah, yes, there are certain things that you're going to want to that specifically apply, but just like new pursuits, the challenge of them and getting improving at them can carry over to other aspects of your life.
I totally agree with you. I think professional and personal development are the same thing. And self-esteem, self-image is a huge part of it. And as you grow up as a child, bullying at school, gangs, becoming shy, you make a mistake, you don't want to repeat it, so you kind of shrink a little bit. That carries itself forward in our adult life as well. My granddaughter is next semester going to be teaching, and she's teaching undergraduate classes, and she's never taught before. And I said, well, is anybody helping you? He said, oh yeah, I'm working with a couple of them now. I go to their classes, I watch how they teach, I watch how the different professors, they're helping me get it. I said, okay, fine. So January is going to come around and she's going to be in the classroom teaching. I hope she loves it. But it's not the easiest damn job in the world. Leadership's not an easy job. And perhaps that's why we don't do these performance reviews well. It's expressing vulnerability, isn't it?
Yes, and I know there's more materials written about leadership now than there has before, which is good. But yeah, I think there's very few true like leadership classes. I've learned from sports, but also just from observing. I think we've all in our careers and our lives come to you observe poor leaders, what those look like, ones that you don't want to work for or would never want to work for again.
Yeah.
And then you get to hopefully observe ones that are really good. And then what are those qualities?
There's Patrick Lencioni. I've mentioned him often over the years. One of his first books was The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And it's interesting he started there. And those 3 signs are anonymity, immeasurability, and I can't remember the other one, but I'll come up with it before we're done. And immeasurability was it's not a word. He created it. It was you being able to have the ability at the end of every day when you leave work and go home to look at what you did that day and determine whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. Blue collar manufacturing jobs, assembly line jobs can all do that easily, readily. But once you get past the blue collar, going to the white collar, it's not that easy.
Right.
It's kind of interesting that that's where he started, and he's written about 15 different books now, and they're all great reads. If you haven't read any, you should. He's terrific.
I've read a couple. I forget I remember the name. Yeah.
There's one of them called The Motive that might appeal to you now on what you do. It's one of his most recent books. But again, it's I used to ask people all the time, what's the last business book you read? And they'd be like alligators or crocodiles. Down would come the inner eye, what are you talking about? We used to have a once a quarter routine when I worked that we'd all get a book and we'd read the book, and at the end of the month we'd sit down and talk about it. It's and that's a very benefit. Again, that gets you perspective. That's interesting.
Definitely.
So that's a good exercise. That's why in our newsletter we recommend 5 books that people write. This month we're going to do some, or this newsletter, January, we're going to have something different. We're going to have a kind of a challenge, and we're going to give book gift certificates for Borders or Barnes and Noble. Borders not around anymore. Barnes and Noble or Amazon or somebody. We have a trivia question that's buried in one section and it'll rotate of the newsletter. People who get the right answer, they'll be in a drawing. Whoever we draw gets $100 or whatever the heck it is now I wonder how many of them will view that as a prize. It's a book. It's a struggle to get people to read. I don't have time for that. If you don't have time for personal development, what the heck have you got time for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common for poor leaders it's a similar profile. They have all the answers. The ones that I've worked with, I don't think I've ever heard them ever say that they messed something up. If something happens, it's always, either the market, no one's buying. Like if our market share is down, well, no one's buying. Or, oh, the competition is just price. They just dropped their price. It's like never messed anything up. They don't ever take responsibility for anything. They have all the answers. They don't need to seek new information out. They don't ever, it's full of well, he's been here for 25 years. So-and-so's been doing this for 20 years. We have all the answers in this room. It's like, those are the worst people to be leading a company, and the worst type of leaders.
It's interesting. I'm struggling to find the quote, but in the last couple of 3 weeks, there was a quote that came forward that a really good leader is somebody that you don't even know exists, because the employees look after everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they're and we've got a lot of talented people. The case with Disney that's going on, getting rid of replacing them with Iger. Going to General Electric, Jack Welch had a 20-year run, and Jeff Immelt, who replaced him, the stock value dropped by 80%. And Immelt was eminently more talented than Jack Welch.
Mm-hmm.
So there's more to it than just credentials. It's a persona. I used to say that you walk into a room and you have an aura. Everybody knows you're in there when you arrive.
Right.
It's kind of weird. There is
intangibles.
It is, and there's no beginning or end on this thing.
And people always, and this is where I always try to bring athletics, because I think athletics and business are very similar. People get obsessed with measurables in sports, and you couldn't look at Tom Brady and say, well, that guy has all the raw material to be the best quarterback of all time. No, he's a 6th round draft pick. And how many there are like Harvard research reports written on NFL teams not being able to pick the correct quarterback in the first round with the first pick or the first round. They're woefully inept at it. It's just, and people get frustrated and it do the same thing in business. It's like, well, but because you can't measure intangibles, when venture capitalists, when they choose to back certain companies, if they can't explain. That's why so many, well, did you go to Stanford? Did you graduate from Stanford? Did you graduate from MIT? So we're going to put our money behind you. And they get frustrated when those companies don't make it. It's the same. It's intangibles make up so much of success, and
What's
you can't measure it.
No, and the other part that's coming up more recently, the last year or so, the major consulting companies, Accenture and McKinsey and those boys, they're coming in for criticism now because they all follow the same cookie cutter approach. They've got the same frame, right? The MBA programs at university are teaching the same thing. The same formula isn't always going to work on a people enterprise.
To the same background of people who goes to Ivy League schools. It's like this select group of population from these boarding schools in this part of the country. It's the same. The cycle repeats.
And I don't, we've got a new governor here. And we've got a serious homelessness problem here. So an observer on the radio, an analyst, made the comment that, well, he's recognized the problem like everybody else has done, but he's going to apply the same solution. We're going to go to the same consulting companies, the same engineering companies, and they're going to come up with the same solutions that have failed over and over and over again. Why are we doing that? So this brilliant person comes along. Elon Musk is a good example. Everybody's trashing him right now for what he did with Twitter, but be careful. That's not the end of the story yet. The guy's brilliant, but he looks at the world in a very different way than you and I do. SpaceX, geez, imagine reusing the rocket. Cuts the cost down dramatically. Traffic, why don't we dig a tunnel?
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah. How many successful car companies have been started since the 1930s? Yes.
This past week, the chairman of Volkswagen said that they were going to pull back on their electric vehicle because they didn't have the talent capable of coming up and competing with an Elon Musk Tesla. That's quite a statement.
Right. The Twitter thing makes me laugh too, because he's getting trashed, like you said, but he didn't create Twitter, and he didn't build a business that doesn't make money. He's the one. Now, one could argue, yes, he's foolish for paying what he paid for it, but they're not in the situation today because of Elon Musk. He's gonna have to do what he wants to do to try to turn around and change their business model. But we get in this cancel culture.
Again, perspective or framing. He has had a big, huge reduction in staff, right?
Right.
Didn't fire anybody. They all left. He didn't pay severance, didn't do anything. They just left.
I know. I did see him fire one guy on Twitter, which is pretty funny.
That's right. That's right.
But you're right. And it's like, we live in a strange society in many ways.
I'm going to leave you a book. It's called The Storm Before the Calm. It's written by a futurist, an intellectual by the name of George Friedman, who I have untold respect for. The Storm Before the Calm is about the decade between 2020 and 2020. Where are we now? 2020 and 2030. That decade. And he wrote it in about 2017 or 16. It's precise. It predicts everything that we're going through now. It's absolutely unbelievable. And again, he's not from inside, he's from outside. And I think that's where we got to go find our solutions more and more, especially with employees. We got to ask the younger employees, what do you want? What do you need? What do you expect from me? I think that's how we get them growing. And I think that's how we get us growing too. But there's no roadmap.
There shouldn't be.
Right? I hope not. That's right. That's a really good point.
There shouldn't be, and there should be a desire for openness. Like it gives you a lot of energy. Like with these guys, like to just start with a blank canvas.
You should be in front of a classroom of 20-year-olds. You want to talk about energy, you want to talk about having fun. Their perspectives are, they're, I mean, I love this stuff. The energy in a university town, I love.
Mhm.
Eugene, Oregon is my favorite, and it's a hippy dippy weatherman type of thing, drugs and everything else you want to get into, but it's a wonderful environment for people that want to think and talk and debate.
Mhm.
Thank you for this, Alex. It's a weird subject to be putting on a podcast because there is no answer, but it's really true. How do we get better? Who drives us to get better? Who helps us get better? I don't think there's a lot of people thinking about that. So thank you for writing that blog, and thank you for being involved in this.
Always, I appreciate it.
So thank you, everybody, for paying. I hope you're still with us because it's been a weird podcast. We've wandered all over the place, and there is no real roadmap, as Alex said. Personal and professional development is the key, and as life is changing so dramatically, it's even more important today than ever before. So thank you, and I look forward to having you with us at the next Candid Conversation. Mahalo.